And we are back with my mayor up to episode 7. And joining me is candidate Ken Welch. Hi, Ken.
Joe, great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
How is life on the campaign trail?
Life is great. We are now, into the debate and forum season. We had our first candidate forum at historic Uptown last week. We got chased off by thunderstorms, but we were able to get all the council member candidates and mayoral candidates who were able to speak. And so now we're into it. We're, about 30 days before mail ballots are going to start hitting mailboxes. And so we're in the final stretch. And it's good also to be out and be able to talk to people now that we've moved forward with the vaccinations, kind of getting back to a sense of normal, not completely there, but it's good to see folks out in normal settings again.
That's great. So today we are trying to get our head around the Tropicana Field redevelopment. A lot of information out there, a lot of misinformation out there. And so we're looking to see what data and perspectives that you have that you could share with us. And we're breaking that up into past, present, and future. So Let's talk about perspectives and important points about the past with regard to the Tropicana Field site.
Again, Joe, a very important question, and not one that can be answered quickly, but we'll give it a shot at a high level. The thing I always talk about when we talk about Tropicana Field is that it's not a blank slate. It is really the story of African Americans in St. Petersburg, a story of sacrifice, and now some 3 decades later, we have the opportunity to make sure that the promises of jobs and economic development are finally fulfilled. For me, it's personal. My first job was at my grandfather's wood yard that was at 488 16th Street. So right at 5th Avenue and 16th Street was my grandfather's wood yard. And that was the first job I had as a boy. And we had to move that for the interstate. And so my grandfather's business was displaced, as were many other businesses. And even the linkage to the Deuces, 22nd Street, was disrupted, and the business and the community there was disrupted by that same interstate project. So that is really linked to Tropicana Field. And as we approach redevelopment, I think it demands that sense of equity in terms of trying to make sure those promises are fulfilled, but there's some kind of ongoing community benefit to that displaced community. And that's why I think the community benefit agreement is such an important part of us moving forward with Tropicana Field. And so the promises of jobs, economic development, that sense of community need to be top of mind as we talk about Tropicana Field. It is a great opportunity for us, but we need to be informed about the true history of Tropicana Field and the Deuces and the continual sacrifices that were made in the name of progress.
Thank you. So when we look through that lens, and what are some of the specific things we can look to, some specific outcomes that we can look for as we do this redevelopment with regard to business opportunities, job opportunities, even the infrastructure of the land and how it's laid out. Can you give us some specifics we can sort of dig our teeth into that
Sure.
will honor that past and bring that equity?
Well, there's a lot there, and I'll get into some of this in the second and third questions about current and future. But I think the Kreisman administration has done a great job in laying out the parameters of what this project has to bring back to the community. It has to bring back housing. It has to bring back jobs and office space. It has to, respect and build on the green space there. It has to have linkage to multimodal transportation options. So it needs to do all those things, and with a foundation of equity. Equity needs to be built into everything that we do, not only with Tropicana Field, but for development around the city in total. And so whether you're talking about access to small and minority businesses, for the contracts, for the construction, for ongoing education opportunities, all of those need to be a part of our process going forward. And I think one of the important things for me, particularly, having lived this process, is the sense of community. When our church was 2 blocks northeast of my grandfather's woodyard. And so our church, Prayer Tower, was moved along with many other churches, businesses, residences. 800 folks were moved out of that area. And what you lost wasn't just the physical buildings because they were able to relocate, but you lost that sense of community. And so as a boy, when I'm walking from granddad's woodyard to the church and I happen to take a couple of mangoes from Miss Brown's yard, by the time I got to the church, they knew about it. And I learned a lesson about asking and consequences. And so you lose that sense of community, right? An entire group of young people, a generation, didn't have that sense of community because it was uprooted and dispersed. And so programs like the Community Benefits Agreement try to rebuild and fund programs that will rebuild that sense of community. And so I think all those things are connected, but I do think the Kreisman administration has laid out a good foundation of what needs to come out of future development at the Trop.
Thank you, and that's a good transition into the second phase of our question. So it seems that there's sort of people moving at different speeds, and there's information that seems to be moving at different speeds. Can you give us the best overview you have of sort of who the stakeholders are and where they are with regard to moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on that same page, Joe. Time is not something we can control, and I think when you just look at the amount of time we have under the current administration, the positioning in terms of negotiating or even communicating between council, the mayor, and the Rays, it looks to me like this needs to move to the next administration. I think a good foundation has been laid with the RFP and the parameters. But just looking at the reality of time when we're sitting here, mid-June, I think we have to get this right for the long term rather than get something done right now with a sense of urgency, because we've waited 35 years as a community, and particularly those who had to sacrifice. We've waited more than 3 decades for the impact of jobs and economic development to occur. And so it's more important that we get it right, because this will be a generational project rather than to try to rush something at this point. And so I think we've got opportunity, but the benefits have to be clear to the community. The community has to clearly understand what we're doing. And in order to get all that community feedback and make sure that the Rays are able to be a part of a productive conversation, and council as well, I think we need to take our time and get this right.
Thank you. And do you think where do you think the role of a consultant might play, an objective sort of third party to examine some of the facts? How do you feel about that?
Well, I know the county and the city are working on that. I think it's a good idea. This is a very complex endeavor, and I do think we need to get that outside consulting and advice. And there's some questions that I've always had. What's the true value? What's the true economic impact of a Major League Baseball? And don't get me wrong, I'm a football guy first, but I love having the Rays here, and I do think there's a path to keep the Rays right where they need to be in St. Petersburg. But you got to have an honest conversation about economic impact and what represents a good return on investment for the citizens of St. Petersburg and Pinellas County.
So let's move on to looking at the future. If elected mayor and you're sort of laying out the elements of a North Star that we can all walk towards as a community, what are those elements? What is that North Star for you with regard to the Trop?
Well, again, this is, Joe, a generational project, and we're 3 decades plus into it already. And obviously, we haven't seen the economic benefit outside of Tropicana Field that was anticipated. There are some legal issues I think that we need to be clear on. The Rays have certain rights to development through the end of the next 6 years, through the end of their operating and use agreement. we need to be strategic about how we approach that. I think we can have discussions, but we need to be clear about the value of that land, the fiduciary interest that the city has in what we do with those 85 acres that we'll never have that opportunity again in St. Petersburg. And then all the other issues that are laid out in the RFP, the housing, the multimodal transportation opportunities, the green space, the educational enhancements. All those things I think we need to look at in a strategic way, not try to make a quick decision, but this is, again, a generational decision that can really direct the path of our city going forward. I believe baseball not only can survive here, but can thrive here. But we have to change, I think, our approach to what it means to host a Major League Baseball team. We have to be willing to innovate, and we have to negotiate in good faith and make it clear what we are willing to do and what we're not willing to do as a city. I believe we can make this a win-win situation, but it will have to be strategic. And I know that there's some folks that want to get it done now. We've got, I think, some good proposals in from the groups that have submitted, and the mayor's whittled that down to 2. Council has some differing opinions, but I think you got, at least a couple of quality proposals there. Let's take our time. Let's be strategic and invest and plan for the long term for Tropicana Field. So that's the strategic long term view.
And if we look at the Rays specifically, obviously the split city plan is one that they're a fan of. They believe that it will allow them to get the total attendance numbers while still getting the bulk of people in St. Pete that want to go to games to those games. So when you talk about what's best for the city, assuming the consultant brings some numbers, what's sort of your logic and strategy with regard to being open to the split city concept, the city supporting elements of a new park. Any other thoughts you can add there?
Well, I'll be perfectly honest with you, Joe. So I was on the county commission when that came out, and I've represented St. Pete on the county commission for 5 terms now, for 20 years. One of the reasons that we increased the bed tax that visitors pay by 1 cent was in anticipation of helping to fund a new Rays stadium. And the Tourist Development Council is a part of that process. They had to be in support of that as well. And after we had a joint meeting with the TDC one day to kind of secure that, we're going to use that 1 cent, that was the day the Rays announced this split season. I literally got a call on the drive back from Clearwater to St. Pete saying, by the way, we're going to have a press announcement that we want to split the season with Montreal. So I wasn't a big fan of the way that was rolled out. But I think once we got past, kind of the punch to our ego, we do have some issues we need to address in terms of attendance. The Rays have put a great product on the field. In a small market, they've whipped the Yankees and Red Sox, God bless them. And they put a good product on the field, and we haven't had the attendance numbers that would justify. But if you look at the one team we were ahead of, and we might be ahead of 2 teams, and this was pre-COVID, in terms of attendance, we were ahead of the Miami Marlins. And the Marlins built a brand new, I think, almost $800 million stadium, and we were still ahead of them in attendance. And so it's more than just building a new stadium. It's having the right mix. I still like looking at an Al Lang location because you get that waterfront view, the same that we get for the Grand Prix. It's broadcast around the world. It's invaluable. And so what I did after the Rays made that announcement as a county commissioner, I started talking to some TDC members and asking them what they thought about the split season. And a lot of them actually like it because they think it could replicate the success we have in spring training, Philadelphia Phillies, Dunedin Blue Jays. We get year-round impact. Folks either buy apartments or condos down here, and they come down here year-round. Those ball clubs have minor league operations, rehab. So you do get true economic benefit from that. And so I'm open to looking at that idea. I know there are a lot of hurdles that the Rays, I think, have to successfully navigate. The players, do they want to have 2 locations? But I do think what we do well is spring training. This would essentially be spring training on steroids, a lower cost stadium because you don't have to have a roof on it, a waterfront view if it's at Al Lang, or even at the Tropicana Field site, a lower cost stadium. All those things to me seem to make sense, and you still would get year round use to the rowdies and other public events. So I'm willing to look at it. Again, recalling that we've had a long history with the Rays. The Rays wanted to go to Al Lang a few years ago. I think it was '08 with the new stadium. And so I think that's the right location. Downtown St. Pete is the right location. And I think we've got a funding source with the county. Again, we have to get our county commissioners to agree to fund that, but they've been supportive. Most folks probably know that Tropicana Field received more than $100 million from our bed tax from the county. And so I think there's a path to get there. We have to have an open mind, and that's why I say we have to be innovative about what baseball will look like in the future. But looking back at last year, baseball was different for all of us because nobody was in the stadiums. And we still had a pretty good year. I won't talk about what happened in Game 6, but we still had a real good year with our Rays. We need to keep them our Rays. I think we can do that.
Some good insight. Thank you for sharing it.
All right.
Kennedy, Ken Welch, thanks for coming back on My Mayor. We'll
Thanks,
see you
Joe.
in a couple of weeks.
All right. Thank you. Take care now.